That guy's in my old writing. Yeah, welcome back to another Stand on Guard. This is the question period cabaret. See if people like that, because it is a floor show, let's face it. So we're trying it. People didn't like Rock'em Sock'em question period yesterday. I'm going to try this one out today. Anyway, we're just going through the statements by members, and we'll be joining the official opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre, as he asks the Prime Minister a question. Will the Prime Minister be there today? Will Justin Trudeau skip question period for the fourth consecutive day? Because if he's not there today, he won't be there tomorrow. Friday is no show for just about all the front row. Yeah, I was there. I know. So we will see if Justin Trudeau shows up. And of course, the questions are going to be hot and heavy. Nobody's asked yet about these 500,000 Gaza refugees. The immigration minister almost let the cat out of the bag the other day by saying, well, don't want to speculate, but Canada does accept refugees from the war. That seemed like a yes to me, but I don't know if he was speaking extemporaneously without thinking. Well, liberals often do that. Or if he was sending up a trial balloon for the prime minister. I don't know. Could be. But we will be joining Pierre very soon as he rises to ask the question. So let's see what happens today. Always an adventure, isn't it? All right. Thanks for joining me today. This is David Crayden, your host, and I will be with you for the next hour or so, making some comments. And please add your comments as you will. I see there's a lot of people come here every day. Thank you very much. There's no, oh, by the way, there's no Freedom Convoy trial today. But yesterday, interestingly enough, the witness for the prosecution, one of the police officers who was liaising between Chris Barber and the police, actually said that the people he talked to weren't there under any authority or any command of either Chris Barber or Tamara Leach. They just came almost organically. It was a spontaneous demonstration that they weren't being led around the nose and they weren't following orders. They weren't even repeating Tamara Leach's line about hold the line. It was just they were there because they wanted to be there. And this really was damaging to the prosecution. So anyway, we're back at that tomorrow. And Friday's the early question period anyway, which I rarely ever cover. So thanks for watching today. I'm going to shut up for a while. And you can listen to these wonderful statements by the members.
Motion which prevented debate on this important piece of legislation. In recent months, the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada has become silent on Ukraine. He has never advocated for military, humanitarian, or economic support for Ukraine, never called out Russia for its acts of genocide against the Ukrainian people, and he has never raised the issue in Parliament except to the false narratives about the war, including the statements that it doesn't contribute to inflation in Canada. I call on the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada to put aside the games, let us debate C-57 and pass this important piece of legislation.
Listen to this. Listen to this moron. He really thinks the war in Ukraine is still going. Ukraine has lost the war.
The honorable leader of the opposition. After 8 years, even the Liberals agree that the Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. After his flip-flop on carbon tax, his former Environment Minister, Catherine McKenna, said that the Prime Minister has broken her heart and he needs to flip-flop on his flip-flop. The future leader, Mr. McCartney, says he's against this flip-flop, and Gerald Butts, as does Percy Down, says that the Prime Minister is not worth the cost and that he should resign. Does the Prime Minister still have the confidence of the Liberal Party? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, every day we work hard to deliver results for Canadians by fighting against climate change, by creating help for Canadian and reducing the cost of living by helping to build more housing. We're here to defend minorities and to ensure that the economy is working for everyone. We're going to continue to do so as a team because the Liberal Party is focused on help to Canadians. Rather than saying that everything's broken, we're here to work hand in hand with Canadians, and we're looking forward to doing this every day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That's pretty pathetic, isn't it? Isn't that a pathetic response?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He's fighting for climate change.
He didn't answer if his party supports him. So that's interesting.
Nobody else. Nobody does.
Mr. Percy Downs said that this government was not serious on the economy. He didn't care. They're throwing money on anything that crosses their mind, and they don't care about the rising costs of living or the huge debts that are piling up. Even the Liberals agree that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Is it only Mark Carney who can save the Liberal government? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we know that we made a choice that the Conservatives don't agree with. We chose to invest in Canadians because confident countries invest in their people. While they preach austerity and cuts, we were there to provide $10 daycare across the country. We were there to provide the Canada Child Benefit. We were there to help with public transit and housing. We were there to help our seniors and our students. All of these programs, the Conservative Party has opposed, and they continue to support, also vote against dental care for children and help for Canadians in need. We are going to continue to be there every day for Canadians. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister paused the paying of the carbon tax for only some people. The Liberal Rural Affairs Minister said, well, other people should have elected Liberal MPs if they wanted to be able to afford heating their home or feeding their kids. The Prime Minister has not denounced that viewpoint. In fact, he's doubling down on punishing people elsewhere. But Liberal MPs in Sudbury, Thunder Bay, North Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, they have starving constituents who are worried about the heat going out as well. Will they have a free vote on my motion to keep the heat on and take the tax off for everyone this Monday?
Of course he's not going to have a free vote on that. He would probably lose that.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Trudeau would lose that.
As a government, we're phasing out the use of coal because it's dirty and bad for the environment. We're now moving on phasing out home heating oil because it's dirtier, more expensive,
and so you give people a break on the carbon tax.
Relied upon by lower income Canadians who don't have other choices. Over 500,000 Ontarians, Mr. Speaker, heat their homes with home heating oil. This program and this approach will not just give them a break, but in working with the Government of Ontario, will deliver heat pumps for Canadians right across the country. I invite Saskatchewan to work with us as well. We need to get Canadians off home heating oil. That's what we're going to do.
So they can freeze with your heat pump, which don't work.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
With an answer like that, he's clearly not worth the cost, and he didn't answer the question as to whether or not his MPs would have a free vote, which begs the question whether his NDP MPs will get a free vote. This Saskatchewan NDP has just voted to endorse my motion to give equal tax-free heat for all Canadians. That is the position of the NDP in BC, Manitoba, and Alberta as well. Now, the question is whether the NDP will vote against its cash-strapped constituents and in favor of the Prime Minister. So can the PM tell us, is this vote part of the coalition agreement, or does the NDP have the freedom to vote for their constituents?
He could disentangle the NDP from the Liberals, which is a very, very smart political move there.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition wants to talk about places across the country. Let's talk about them. 20,000 Saskatchewanians heat their homes with home heating oil. 50,000 Albertans and about 100,000 British Columbians, Mr. Speaker. That is dirty, it is more polluting, and it is more expensive, particularly for the predominantly lower income families that rely on this. That's why we're moving forward to replace them with heat pumps, working with the provinces to deliver free heat pumps for lower income families so that they can save money and fight pollution at the same time. This is about helping Canadians as we fight climate change, which the Leader of the Opposition has no plan for.
Heat pumps for people who won't use them, who can't use them. You're an idiot.
Prime Minister save his political bacon, Mr. Speaker. And we know that because he's now admitted that his carbon tax is not worth the cost of oil for some people in some regions. My motion simply says that all Canadians get the same break. After all, a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. Yesterday, the Prime Minister indicated that he wants to have a carbon tax election on his plan to quadruple the tax to 61 cents a litre on heat, gas, and groceries. So will he confirm whether or not he considers my motion to keep the heat on and take the tax off a confidence vote?
Yeah, good. We've got him here. He won't answer. Trudeau's running scared.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, home heating oil is dirtier, more expensive, and more relied on by lower-income Canadians across the country. 1.3 million households across this country rely on home heating oil. That's why we're working with the provinces that want to replace them for free with heat pumps. That's what this is about. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is making a serious mistake if he thinks that Canadians are not concerned about the environment, or that Canadians don't know that protecting the environment does go hand in hand with creating good jobs and prosperity for them across the country. That is a conversation I look forward to continuing to have over the next 2 years with Canadians.
What a joker. What a clown. No, he won't have a non-confidence vote over it. He's a coward.
The honourable member for Ballet-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, the Quebec government announced its immigration.
So you saw what happened there. You saw what happened there. Trudeau will not have either a free vote or a vote of non-confidence or a vote of confidence on Poilievre's question about extending the pause or axing the tax. He is afraid to do either because he can't win in either case. What do you bet? They've already sounded out the NDP on this, and the NDP is probably going to splinter, probably going to crack, and this feeble alliance between the NDP socialists and the Liberal socialist fascists will crumble. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens Monday with this vote, because clearly Poilievre has got Trudeau on the ropes with this, and this could disentangle this unholy alliance between the NDP and the Liberals. Anyway, we'll get back to the question period here. But it's just Trudeau blathering on over a block question. But
back in other provinces, the honourable member for Ballet-Chambly. It's always been true for health as well. We always say that we've talked with them, but we've never changed anything. But yesterday, he voted. He said, yes, I'm going to consult Quebec before setting targets for immigration. And his minister was announcing them. So they should be coherent and speak with someone Quebec. Otherwise, they need to be aware of this. Quebec has to be able to teach French to the immigrants that come. Otherwise, they lose their weighting in the Canadian Federation. What will the conclusion be, Mr. Speaker? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. We have provided hundreds of millions of dollars every year to Quebec to help teach French to immigrants. Quebec establishes its immigration targets and will always continue to work with them. For months and years, we've been working with them on immigration. We're going to continue to do so. So yes, we did support the motion that said we'll continue to speak with Quebec and the other provinces while we establish targets. And we're going to continue to do so responsibly, reasonably, and ambitiously for the future of our country. The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby. The cold is setting in. Heating costs are adding to families' already tight budgets. And this government says it's only willing to help if you voted Liberal. It's shameful. The NDP's plan to eliminate the GST on home heating will put more money back into the pockets of everyone across the country while protecting the environment. Again, the Conservatives have said no to this NDP proposal. Will the Liberals eliminate the GST on home heating to help families who are already struggling? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I know, Mr. Speaker, that my honourable colleague is truly concerned about the environment and climate change and wants to help Canadians to be able to face the cost of living. And that is why he understands that with more than 100,000 families in BC who rely on home heating oil, it's a big challenge for them in terms of their wallets and the environment. So we have an approach that will replace this home heating oil in BC with heat pumps, and it'll help families to face affordability. And I look forward to continue working with him.
The honourable member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Liberal member for Kings Head said we should do our homework when it comes to heat pumps. Well, you know who did his homework? Perry from Smithers, BC. He's a teacher, after all. And for a year and a half now, he's been trying to jump through all these government's hoops to get a $5,000 heat pump rebate. I talked to the folks at Efficiency Canada, and they told me unequivocally this government's heat pump program does not work for people on low income. So will the Prime Minister commit to offering the same deal he just offered Atlantic Canadians for heat pumps to all Canadians who heat with fossil fuels?
This guy's not looking
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Yes, that is exactly what we are doing. We are offering the same program for heat pumps that we have with Nova Scotia, PEI, and Newfoundland and Labrador to all provinces across the country.
For a
all they
useless
have to
heat pump
do
that
is
will not
join
keep
us
you warm in the
making sure
winter.
we can deliver heat pumps
And if you're so poor to get a free one, you don't own a house.
Million households across
What
this
a clown.
country, 500,000 in Quebec, 250,000 in Ontario, tens of thousands across the provinces that need to replace those heat pumps to clean the air, to save their wallet some money. That's exactly what we're doing. I look forward to working with BC.
It's not even carbon neutral, you idiot.
On this program.
Where does the power come from to power your heat pump? Same source that doesn't power your brain, Trudeau.
Member from Thornhill.
Prime Minister said Tuesday that there will absolutely not be more carbon tax exemptions under his watch, but Canadians struggling with the high cost of gas, groceries, and heating their home have a word about that, or want a word about that. After 8 years of this Liberal NDP government, the Prime Minister is only giving the relief to a lucky 3% of the country, specifically where his poll numbers are in the gutter. He's already admitted that the carbon tax makes life harder. So will he let his MPs have a free vote on our motion on Monday to keep the heat on and take the tax off for all Canadians?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I noted the phrase, a lucky 3%. These are people who pay 2 to 4 times the cost of natural gas. These are folks for whom their costs have gone up by 75% during 2022. These are not the lucky 3%. We have focused on people who actually have a strong affordability challenge because of the inordinate cost of heating oil. We've put in place a measure that will ensure affordability, but will do so in a manner that fights climate change. Truly, a lucky 3%? Really?
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
This is exactly what the Prime Minister does when he's desperate and flailing, not confident about his leadership. Canadians in other parts of the country now have one more reason to regret voting for them. Like in Northern Ontario, where a minister at the cabinet table has sold out her own neighbors and left them out in the cold. So will she vote with those who sent her to this place and scrap the tax on all home heating, or will she vote with the Prime Minister and remind Thunder Bay that she's just not worth the cost?
The honourable member, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know what she will do? She will stand with the folks that have an affordability challenge related to heating oil. It will apply in every province and territory in this country where provinces step up to co-deliver with the federal government. It is a plan that will address the short-term issues for those folks who are most pressed, but do so in a manner that will save significant dollars in the long term. It will address it in a manner that is consistent with fighting the existential threat of climate change. And I say again in this House, it is a shameful thing that in this country we still have a political party that does not believe in the reality of climate change and has no plan to address it.
You are the shameful reality of a minister who claims you're weaning people off
The
oil.
honourable member from Dufferin-Caledon.
Actually shameful is how they continue to divide Canadians every chance they get. Now it's about heat. Siggy in Dufferin just paid $100 to heat his home for 1 month. $100 in carbon tax. In the Maritimes, Siggy would pay $0, dividing Canadians. Siggy's on a fixed income. He can't afford it. They're basically saying to him he should freeze in the dark. Why don't they stop dividing Canadians? And will they take the tax off so Siggy can keep the heat on?
Identity politics is all about dividing Canadians, and that's what specializes in.
The honourable minister.
The only folks in this chamber who are dividing Canadians is the Conservative Party of Canada. We are focused on ensuring that we address what is a significant affordability challenge. The heating oil costs 2 to 4 times what natural gas does, and it appreciated by 75% in 2022. It is time that the Conservatives stop playing partisan games and focus
right on, Marvin. He's in need.
Policy that addresses critical issues that face Canadians, but does so in a manner that protects affordability and addresses climate change. Once again, I would say it is shameful that they have no policy to address climate change.
Yeah. This is a government obsessed with climate change. It's a death cult.
$300,000 a year, being driven around in a limo, says I'm making a political stunt when I talk about a retired senior who can't pay the carbon tax. This behavior by them is disgusting. And not all Liberals have to behave that way, because on Monday, a common sense Conservative motion to axe the tax will take place. They don't have to behave like a limousine Liberal minister. They can stand up for their constituents. They can vote to take the tax off so people like Siggy can keep the heat on.
This Wilkinson is just a bloody elitist joke.
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In an awkward position.
Oh, and this guy is
my colleague here in the House.
Seamus Reagan.
On the other side of the House,
tell us one of your stories.
They do have a plan, and in fact, they had that plan, and some of them owe their seats to that plan. It was a carbon tax plan. It was the Aaron O'Toole Christmas wish book of greeny things that this Conservative Party will pick out just in time for the holiday season. Mr. Speaker, once again, with the price on pollution, we put cold, hard cash back into the pockets of Canadians.
You steal cold, hard cash out of the pocket of Canadians. You are a despicable joke.
Order.
Or you can just not take it.
Yes, the Liberal Party is a death cult, because if they want to freeze you to death,
would like to
they want
hear
to starve
the question
you to death,
from the honourable member for
they want
Saint-Jean.
you to commit suicide.
Mr. Speaker,
That
let
is
me
what
give
the
you a
Liberal
few
Party is
facts.
all about.
The carbon tax affects the price of food in Quebec, and the second tax will apply to Quebec. The Bloc wants to hike Liberal taxes on gas and food. A record number of Quebecers use a food bank each month. The PM has just announced a carbon tax break, but only for Atlantic Canada. This is unfair and illogical. Will the Liberals vote with us on our common sense motion to eliminate the carbon tax on all forms of heating for all Canadians? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The price on the pollution puts more money back in the middle-class Canadians'
pollution.
pockets.
Carbon is
Climate
not
change,
pollution, you have
we
to
know
wit.
that the leader doesn't believe in what I've
Maybe
just said, but
grow
does
some
my
brains.
dear
You could
colleague
also grow
agree
some hair.
that we need to meet with former colleagues from the
This is
University
the
of Laval
nitwit
for a
who said we
101
should be
class
getting
on the price
COVID
on pollution?
shots until the day we die,
The honourable
and
member
who got
for Haut
COVID
Saint
3
Charles.
times, even though he was
Mr.
boosted
Speaker,
twice.
I'd like to tell my colleague, the member from Quebec, that his Atlantic colleagues had another version of the price on pollution, as he calls it. What we saw in Atlantic Canada, that people were struggling in Atlantic Canada, and the Prime Minister had to flip-flop and eliminate the carbon tax. What we're asking is to be fair for all Canadians and Quebecers, because the federal carbon price also increases the carbon market in Quebec, which has doubled. So will the Bloc vote with the Liberals and perhaps the NDP to cut the carbon tax for all home heating?
None I have.
The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't count 1 or 2 or 3, but 4 members from the Leaders' Caucus
I wouldn't want to run into this
supported
woman
a
on a
price on
dark and
pollution
stormy
in
night.
Quebec. How many others, Mr. Speaker, are hiding that have changed their opinion since they became Conservatives? And
I
the
swear
message I have for
she
them,
never
Mr.
can pick up the
Speaker,
right script when
is to
she
don't be afraid of
answers
their
the question.
leader and to respect their opinion, Mr. Speaker.
None I have, député de
The honourable member for Lac Saint Jean. Mr. Speaker, yesterday at 11:30,
Yeah, I
the
see.
Quebec
I'm
immigration
going to shut him up for
minister
a
said
second.
that she had
She's
not.
just a blockhead. Great response here from Cheryl Fair. If I hope you pronounce your last name right. The poorest people in Canada live on the streets in tents and cars. Will they get candles for Christmas or a heat pump to celebrate the holidays? Oh, that's exactly. You might as well heat your house with a candle, because these heat pumps are going to be worthless in most parts of Canada from Christmas until March. This is a joke. This is a cruel joke, but it's nonetheless a joke. And the Liberals know they're playing this cruel joke in Canadians. They're talking about free heat pumps for people who don't even need them or want them because they don't have houses. This is absolute nonsense. And they want it both ways. And they just keep standing truth on its head and lies on its feet because they are nothing but chronic liars, prevaricators. Anyway.
None I have.
The honourable member for Lac Saint Jean. Mr. Speaker, there was no consultation. Quebec confirmed it. And better still, the Minister of Immigration himself admitted yesterday.
These blockheads, you know, they're as bad as the Liberals in terms of obsession.
That he'd spoken to
They get
Christine
fixated on one question, one idea, one notion for weeks at a time.
Mr. Speaker,
and it's got to have something to do with Quebec
setting his thresholds.
and its
He has confirmed
linguistic
that he has not
policies
done
or its
so.
immigration
So,
policies. Or
will he go
not
back and do
getting
his
enough
homework,
money
Mr.
from the
Speaker?
federal government, even though they want to separate, which is why the blockheads drive me crazier than
Minister.
anybody.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague knows
Except
full
for
well that
people like that.
Quebec sets its own immigration thresholds by consulting various stakeholders and organizations. It has its own needs. And of course, when we establish our targets, we discuss this with Quebec. What I find strange is that the Bloc is never happy. They are angry that we vote against their motion, and they're mad because we're voting for their motion now.
Actually, he was living on the
They're
street
just a
till
bunch
last
of
night.
grumpy
No.
Smurfs.
It looks like he was living on the street last night. So he got his suit at the Sally Ann. Anyway,
Order, please. I'm sure that everyone would like to listen to the question from the honourable
yeah, but
member
we don't want to
Saint-Jean.
listen to you. Okay, another blockhead. Got to make a comment here. Well, we have a blockhead up, and nobody really gives a damn what the block says because they're really quite irrelevant, aren't they? Here's the question for you, good people who are watching, listening. I mentioned yesterday, or sometime this week, that Canada has been targeted to take perhaps 500,000 refugees from Gaza. This question was posed to the Minister of Immigration, Mark Miller, earlier this week. He did not say no. He said he didn't want to speculate. He'd have to look into it a bit more. But he said Canada does accept refugees during war. Sounded like a yes to me. So if we take 500,000 refugees from Gaza who don't even want to come here, it would be like resettling people against their will. How are we going to house them, feed them, clothe them, and keep them warm? Heat pumps? We're going to use heat pumps in the tents, are we? We're going to have to create a tent city for these people. This is how stupid the Liberal government is. Watch them say yes to this, because they think this is going to just distract Canadians from the catastrophe that Justin Trudeau has created in Canada. They think this will be a nice distraction, like a humanitarian gesture, but it's going to be a disaster. Here, I'll be back here.
For every single Canadian.
That's right.
It's snowing in southern Alberta. It's cold, but it shouldn't be a luxury to heat your home. And yet when this Prime Minister quadruples his carbon tax, Mountain View Farms in my riding will be paying $480,000 a year in carbon taxes. But this Prime Minister says no carbon tax relief for Alberta. But on Monday, the Liberal members from Calgary Skyview and Edmonton Centre have a chance to defend Alberta and vote with us to end the tax and keep the heat on. Will they do it?
You know they won't. Now, what's he going to say to distract from that one?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honorable friend across the aisle is forgetting some facts, which is the price on pollution is put in such a way that there is a rebate that goes back. 80%
He's doing a Chrystia Freeland impersonation here.
Alberta
very good.
Gets $386
Excellent.
per quarter. It is
Christy's
more
not
than
been
what
around
people
for
pay in
weeks.
terms of the price
I don't
on
know where
pollution.
she is.
The exemption
With people like this, we
for
don't need
3 years
Chrystia
for
Freeland
home
to have
heating oil
contempt for.
is based on the specific issue around the cost associated with home heating. It is done in a manner that
What a
is consistent
performer,
with continuing
eh?
to fight climate change, which is what a price on pollution is all about.
He always wanted to be a Harvard professor. Did you know that? But he ended up in the House of Commons in the Liberal cabinet instead. So he has to pretend that, he really is that Harvard professor, lecturing to you with his hands and with his contemptible looking eyes. And yes, he really does know more than anybody else. Oh, gotta listen to my friend, Michael.
Who they work for, the Prime Minister or Canadians who want the tax off and the heat on. It's cold in Edmonton, and yet Edmontonians are being penalized as a result of this NDP Liberal government's punitive carbon tax on home heating. So, is the Liberal minister from Edmonton going to order the NDP MP for Edmonton Griesbach to once again vote against his constituents, or will he be permitted to vote with Conservatives to axe the tax and keep the heat on?
Good question, Michael. Michael's a good guy.
The Honourable Minister.
I've interviewed him many times.
On this side of the House, we work each and every day for all Canadians who live in
And this
every
guy
province and territory in this
just
country.
too much to bear.
We do so in a manner that ensures that we are addressing critical issues in a thoughtful way and making good public policy decisions. We are not playing partisan games that are played by the members opposite. At the end of the day, we are focused on ensuring that we are addressing affordability concerns, legitimate affordability concerns, in a manner that is consistent with addressing climate change. I say once again, Mr. Speaker, it is shameful that on that side of the House,
It's shameful you have the gall to stand up in the House of Commons at all. You should put your head in a bag.
From St. Albert, Edmonton.
That's what you should be doing.
Mr. Speaker, last year the NDP voted against our common sense conservative motion to scrap the carbon tax on home heating. The Liberals have admitted that these taxes are not worth the cost after they exempted Atlantic Canada, but once again left Albertans out in the cold. So, is the Liberal minister from Edmonton going to order the NDP MP for Edmonton Strathcona to once again vote against the wishes and interests of her constituents, or will she be permitted to axe the tax to keep the heat on?
Well, you have to see Wilkinson say the same thing again.
Speaker.
No, this time
$340
it's
million
Mr.
in
Greenpeace
damages from
activist.
storm in Ontario. Over $720 million from the wildfire
This
in
guy
BC.
is the real
Over
criminal
$300
here.
million from storms in Alberta and in the prairies. Over $170 million from flooding in Nova Scotia. This is what climate change has cost Canadian just this summer. And these are insurance costs, Mr. Speaker. Total
not
costs are
climate
3 times
change.
that.
Don't make the correlation, you bimbo.
The climate-denying Conservative Party of Canada would like us to believe that climate change isn't costing anything to Canadians. It is costing Canadians hundreds of $millions every year, Mr. Speaker.
No, natural disasters are. Arson is off.
The honourable member from Edmonton,
You are an idiot.
Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker,
To
more
make
than
that correlation without
400
any evidence
Canadians
at all.
are trapped in Gaza, including Ahmed Al-Hilo of Edmonton,
Let me
recovering
shut
from
her up for a
surgery.
minute here. We have a comment I want to get back to here from Marvin Wilson. David, check out the Phoenix payroll system. The government is funneling our CPP money right out of the CRA. All right. Yes, I have heard this one before, Marvin. It's worth looking into because I've been saying for years that the Liberal government has been using the CPP as discretionary spending. They have been dipping into this for years and using it to spend. And to say that if Alberta is going to bankrupt the CPP is nonsense. The system is already bankrupt. That's why they don't want Alberta to leave, because it's going to take more money out of an already bankrupt system, and it's going to reveal the extent of the damage that the Liberal government has already done to the pension system in Canada. And it's going to be a huge scandal and a huge embarrassment. So, yes, thank you. The Phoenix payroll system also deserves a very close look. I mean, how can you take these NDPers seriously when they have no intention of deposing this government? When they are in cahoots, they're in their pocket. How can you take them seriously?
It's something that I share deeply and profoundly.
Yeah, you have a
in
lot
this
to
home
do with
province
mental.
of
Yes,
British
you have some
Columbia,
mental
the
health issues,
agreement
I'm
that
sure,
we
Mark.
made, to see over the next 3 years a really historic amount of money flow to help in all aspects of healthcare, including mental health, was exceptionally important. We're committed not only to see that in British Columbia, but across the country. We have much more work to do in mental health, in all aspects of mental health. This is going to require a whole of government approach.
All right,
really
we got the sound back
all of us
just
to
in
think about
time
how
for
we can
Mr.
do
Baggage
everything
here.
we can to treat each other better and put mental health at the front of our workplaces and in our lives.
C.B.
The
Boucher.
honourable member
All
from
of them
West
looks like a
Vancouver,
wino. Well,
Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky
it
Country.
does. A lot of them look like
people in our
winos,
riding of
actually.
West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country, and right across the country are grappling with the housing crisis. Now more than
Oh,
ever,
nice
they need
softball.
more affordable housing
Softball
options like
question.
co-ops. In my home province of British Columbia, 275 co-ops provide safe and affordable housing to well over 15,000 people. We need governments to build on this by promoting and expanding co-op housing across the country. But earlier this week, when asked about social and co-op housing, the Conservative leader said, "We do not need a Soviet-style takeover of housing." How does the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities respond to that?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to affordable housing, the Conservative Party couldn't be more out of touch. Referring to co-ops as Soviet-style housing is a slap in the face to the 250,000 Canadians who live in homes like that. This isn't the first time I've seen him criticize middle-class Canadians' living arrangements. Just this past summer, he labeled
this is the guy with the right, left, right, left.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians need bold federal leadership to solve the housing crisis, and that's what
Well, they
we're
haven't
going
got
to
it with
deliver.
you.
The Conservative leader who insults middle-class homes while he goes home to his own government paid-for housing arrangement simply doesn't get it. It's reckless behavior. We won't stand for it.
Sean Fraser looks like a used car salesman. Yeah.
The honourable member from South Surrey, White Rock.
The BC NDP Premier has demanded carbon tax fairness and equal treatment for British Columbians. The NDP member for North Island Powell River votes with her Ottawa boss, the Prime Minister, punishing people in Campbell River struggling with high home heating costs. On Monday, we'll vote for our common sense plan to take the tax off all home heating for all Canadians for good. How does this carbon tax coalition work? Will the PM require the NDP member for North Island Powell River to vote against the Conservative plan, or will she vote with us to keep the heat on and axe the tax?
I must have missed the person with the mask on. Was it some idiot wearing a mask? I mean,
thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm
had
glad
to be
the
a
honourable
Liberal
member raised the government of British Columbia. I had the opportunity to speak to my counterpart from British Columbia this morning. We will be engaging British Columbia in a code delivery arrangement to ensure that 10,000 British Columbia households that are on heating oil will get a free heat pump and get them off to reduce their costs on an ongoing basis. But I would also say, Mr. Speaker, that affordability is also about the economy and jobs. And I would say what's happening in the committee, in the Natural Resources Committee, with the obfuscation by the opposition is a shame. It is destroying jobs and economic opportunity for Newfoundland, Labrador, and for Nova Scotia. You should be ashamed of the behavior there.
What a grandstanding idiot.
The honourable member from South Surrey, White Rock.
No, George
George
Binger. No, Justin hasn't resigned yet.
Down for all Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
He will hang on
Canadians
tenaciously.
know this flailing Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Seniors in Smithers shouldn't be punished for heating their homes. And the BC NDP Premier agrees. Common sense Conservatives will axe the tax on home heating for every single Canadian. Does the NDP member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley have a choice on Monday's vote, or must he vote with his political master? Will the Prime Minister require that NDP member to vote his way, or is he going to support our Conservative plan to keep the heat on and axe the tax?
Well, I can bet you he's not going to support the axe tax.
Minister.
They've got so much invested in this.
My
here he is.
colleagues should know that the 10,000 homes in British Columbia that actually utilize heating oil, yes, they will actually have access to free heat pumps because the government of British Columbia is stepping up to work with the government of Canada
to free heat pumps
ensure
if they're living below the poverty line.
Affordability concerns, not just for the short
See,
term,
he doesn't
but
even
for
have
the
his
long
talking
term,
points
doing
right.
so in a manner that is
His
consistent
last
with this
answer,
government's
as he was
commitment to
waving
fight
his
climate
hand
change,
at you,
a commitment
he
that is
forgot
shared
about
by
that.
governments around the world, a commitment that is shared by every party in this House except for the Conservative Party of Canada.
Well, you're the party that's going to be history, my friend, very, very soon. And you're crumbling before our eyes right now.
Families to heat their homes, regardless of what type of fuel they use or what region of the country they're from. And after 8 years of this Prime Minister and a year and a half of the NDP Liberal coalition, Canadians realize that they're not worth the cost. On Monday, the NDP will have a choice to make: support their constituents who are suffering from energy poverty, or support a panicking Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister force the NDP, with what little dignity they have left from their coalition agreement, to support the people they represent, to keep the tax off and the heat on?
Sorry, the honourable minister.
Speaker, the member opposite.
Oh, it's her turn to make a
families.
fool of
Well,
herself.
everything that we do at the heart
Easy.
of our
Janice
actions on this
Dodds,
side of
did
the
you work
house
in a
are
bar?
focused on ensuring that we're there for families. And I look to building a national early learning and childcare system as just one way that we are looking to support families.
Hey, with a name like that, she could have
affordable,
worked in a bar. Let's face
high-quality,
it.
accessible childcare across this country saves families hundreds of dollars each and every month. And that's just one of the ways that we are working to make life more affordable
These
for
people are
Canadian
funny
families.
as hell. Tell you. Oh.
The honourable member from Provencher.
Mr. Speaker, it's been 8 long years, but on Monday, the NDP have a chance to show who they work for. Is it for the Prime Minister, who's just not worth the cost, or for Canadians who want the tax off and the heat on? It's cold in Manitoba. It gets down to minus 40. It shouldn't be a luxury for folks to keep the heat on. The member from Churchill and her NDP colleagues will have a chance on Monday to show who they work for. On Monday, will the NDP vote with the Liberals, or will they vote for Canadians to axe the tax for all forms of home heating?
Oh, we're going to get this thing, man. I got to respond to some comments. But, It's interesting that nobody on the Conservative caucus has mentioned that the heat pumps don't work. I don't think they know that. God, somebody has got to. I've got to pass that on. You think they have enough researchers, but I've got to pass that on.
Homes in Manitoba that actually use heating oil to ensure that they will be addressed in a thoughtful and affordable way. I congratulate the government of Manitoba for being proactive on this important issue and its continuing commitment to fighting climate change.
The honourable member for Terrebonne. Mr. Speaker, since June, the Federation of Independent Business has been warning that many small and medium enterprises are headed for bankruptcy. Well, the Federation has updated its figures and almost nothing has improved since then. As of now, over 220,000 businesses are at risk of failure if the federal government does not extend the repayment of emergency account loans without loss of subsidy. 220,000 SMEs still have neither the cash.
She's been up on her feet the last 9 days asking about the same thing. And like, really, does anybody care? And the irony of this is you've got a separatist party whining for more federal money all the time. And it's just, these people are the worst examples of what a member of parliament should be. I always avoided them. When I worked on the Hill, I always avoided blockheads because they're just reprehensible completely. And there are actually a few good liberals in those days, but I don't think there's a single good liberal anymore. Well, I don't.
Loans. What else is our government doing? We are listening to small businesses around the country, and we are supporting them, Mr. Speaker.
Supporting them.
The honourable member for Terrebonne. Mr. Speaker,
oh dear.
18 days, that's not repayment flexibility. In my riding alone, 72 SMEs are at risk of bankruptcy if the federal government doesn't do something. These are family businesses that I know, where people have worked their whole lives. These businesses also employ hundreds of people, Mr. Speaker. If the federal government doesn't stop being intransigent towards our family businesses, in Terrebonne alone, hundreds of jobs could be lost. Who among the Liberal ministers is going to help? The Minister of Small Business, the Minister of Finance, who will come to my riding and explain to Natasha, Sylvain, and Eric that they're going to let them down because of so-called fiscal restraint. The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for her question. I would like to remind my colleague that over 900,000 businesses were saved by our government. If we hadn't been there for them, those businesses would have had to close shop.
You believe that? You believe 900,000 businesses were saved by the Liberal government?
Extensions. We have
How many businesses
more
collapsed during
flexibility
COVID
for
because of
refinancing and
people
for
ever tell you the
loan
truth?
forgiveness.
No.
So we are supporting businesses. We always have, and we will
It's
continue to
all
do so time and time
manufactured
again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. On Monday, all members of this House will be called upon to vote for our motion to eliminate the carbon tax for all forms of home heating for all Canadians permanently, to support all Canadians. But after 8 years under this Liberal government, they're swimming upstream, and even the Bloc Québécois wants to speed up the carbon tax and drastically increase it. Voting for the Bloc, they're not worth the cost. What about the Bloc Québécois leader? Will he vote against our motion on Monday? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to correct something that was said in this place earlier this week. The Government of the Bank of Canada said that each year, carbon pricing contributes to 0.15% of inflation, which he describes as a minor, tiny effect annually. So the carbon tax does not increase the price of everything. That is inaccurate, according to the Governor of the Bank of Canada. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Yes, but he should look at his figures and do his homework a bit more, because in fact 16% of inflation is affected by the carbon tax, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, here's my next question. The NDP only has one Quebec MP. I'm interested to know whether the NDP will vote in favor of our motion to eliminate the carbon tax on all forms of home heating. Will he support Canadians and Quebecers or the Liberals? Will they support the thousands of Quebecers who are using food banks every month? After 8 years of these policies, will the Prime Minister allow the Bloc and the NDP to vote freely of their own accord for our motion on Monday? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, I find it surprising that the Conservatives are quoting the Bank of Canada governor all while they are campaigning to get him fired. Mr. Speaker, the governor of the Bank of Canada recently confirmed that carbon pricing only contributes 0.15% to inflation, and that carbon pricing will not have long-term effects on inflation. That is what the governor of the Bank of Canada said, Mr. Speaker.
From Niagara Falls.
Speaker, it's cold in Northern Ontario. It's not a luxury for residents of Northern Ontario to heat their homes. The Prime Minister has created two categories of Canadians, those who got a temporary pause on the carbon tax on home heating and those that didn't. The Prime Minister has been clear that he opposes providing relief from his unaffordable carbon tax for all Northern residents. My question is, will Northern Ontario MPs be free to vote with us on our common sense Conservative motion to take the tax off and keep the heat on for all Canadians?
We still haven't answered that question, and we won't.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've said a number of times,
And this jackass is going to say the same thing he said the last 15 times he got up.
As natural gas as a heating source. It has accelerated by 75% in 2022 alone. It is creating significant challenge for folks.
There he goes with his Christy Freeland impersonation again.
That will ensure that we are able to address that
really
in a long-term,
gifted at doing
sustainable way
the
through the
Freeland
implementation
impersonation.
of free heat pumps. That program will apply in any
He's
province
back
and
to free heat
territory that
pumps
is
again.
willing to step up. It certainly is open to the government of Ontario, and I look forward to discussions with my counterpart in that regard.
You don't look forward to anything except getting to the bar later. Now get out of here.
From Etobicoke Centre.
Mr. Speaker, we've worked very hard to ensure that Canada's unwavering support for Ukraine is shared by all parties in this House. Unfortunately, that support for Ukraine is not unanimous in this House. Conservatives are delaying Bill C-57, the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. Their MPs are calling the legislation woke. But most concerning is the leader of the Conservative Party's silence on support for Ukraine. He has not called for military, humanitarian, or financial support for Ukraine.
The war is over.
Ukraine
has lost the war.
His silence speaks volumes.
Only idiots like this think there's a war to fight for.
Reassure Canadians that despite
Not a cent more to that bottomless pit in Ukraine.
Ukrainian people until they win.
They're not going to win, you cap-witted morons. They've lost the war. And we have spent billions, and it's all going to Ukrainian oligarchs. And they're going to be running out of the country with it. Thanks to people like you, half-wits in the House of Commons, who gave them all the money they want.
Ukraine, as they defend their freedoms, independence, and democracy, is unwavering. Since Russia began their unprovoked aggression, we have supported Ukraine with almost $10 billion in assistance. My colleague is a steadfast advocate for Ukraine, and what he raises is troubling. This is not the time for unnecessary delays of this important legislation. This is not the time for doublespeak by the Conservatives and their leader. I ask the leader of the opposition to stop with the political games and stand with us to show Ukraine and Ukrainian Canadians that we are all united.
Yes, we've laundered enough money through Ukraine. Ken Sherwood. Yes, that's all spent. They're stealing every bloody dollar.
Very well today in question period. I encourage all members.
How nice they've got your approval.
To their whips as I ask you to keep your voices to yourselves. If you wish to have conversations, feel free to take them behind the curtains.
Feel free to get out of here.
The honourable member from Fundy Royal.
Speaker, after 8 years, this out-of-touch NDP Liberal government doesn't even know what a rural community is. In a totally transparent effort to save seats in Atlantic Canada, Liberals will be giving a rural rebate to downtown residents of the city of Fredericton, but not to someone who commutes 100 kilometers a day for work from an actual rural community of St. Martin's, population under 300. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will the Liberals quadruple the tax on Atlantic Canadians, or will they vote with us to axe the tax on all forms of home heating?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it's hard to imagine
This
that
is the guy who's
party
trying
more
to fly.
opposed an interest to my region of Atlantic Canada than the federal
Here he
Conservative
goes.
Party. They're painting a measure as only benefiting one region that has national application on just weeks after they signaled that they will not support the development of offshore renewable energy in my region. Mr. Speaker, we are moving forward with a policy that is going to reduce the cost of home heating for many people across the country, and we are going to put more money in the pockets of rural residents across this country as well. It's the right path forward. We're going to protect the environment and save households money.
He's going to fly forward and keep it up.
The honourable member from South Shore, St. Margaret's.
What's hard to imagine is that after 8 years, the plummeting Prime Minister panicked last week with his carbon tax announcement. But Nova Scotians who made the decision to convert to cleaner propane have been exempted from that announcement and will have to pay
this is the guy with the mask on.
cents a litre more on their home heating. This flip-flopping Prime Minister has finally admitted that he's not worth the cost. Will the Liberals admit that they're going to quadruple the carbon tax on Atlantic Canadians after the next election? Or will they join us on Monday, the Conservatives, and vote to axe the carbon tax on all home heating?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what I find fascinating is I'm unable to discern from the Conservative Party's rhetoric around this issue is whether they actually support our decision to invest in measures that's going to reduce pollution across Canada and put more money in the pockets of households by getting heat pumps to them. For awareness, Mr. Speaker, this is the kind of measure that's going to save my neighbors thousands of dollars every year and reduce energy costs by creating a more efficient solution. It's going to have the same impact for people who use home heating oil right across the country. So I respond with a question to my honourable colleague.
It's a great comment here from Alice, 1402.
For our residents.
John Fraser, the used car runs great. Don't worry that it's missing the engine. Sounds great.
Member for Boaks.
It's a quiet
Mr.
ride.
Speaker, it's been 8 years of this totally out-of-touch government with the backing of the NDP and the Bloc. The Bloc is not worth the cost. Last week's announcement is a humiliation for Quebec.
I tell
All
you.
Canadians need help, not just Atlantic Canadians, where Liberals are dropping in the polls, but yet again, dividing Canadians is what the Prime Minister
It really
does
is
best.
a pathetic floor show.
On Monday, will the Prime Minister ignore the Bloc and vote in favor
You're going to ignore
of
this one
our
again.
common
Just
sense
ignore this
Conservative
question,
motion
please. Thank you very
to
much. You just ignore it. No, no.
all Canadians?
We won't answer that.
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'm wondering
Mr.
where
Greenpeace is
the
going to
common
answer.
sense is, because many opposition members were part of governments in Quebec and British Columbia,
They
New
all
Brunswick,
supported the
and in the
climate
past
change.
they were in
okay.
favor of carbon pricing. And at that time, they seemed to believe in climate change.
Well, maybe people
and feel that it
wised
was an
up, except
important
you
issue.
never will.
There
Because
are
there's something definitely wrong
200,000
with your
families
thinking.
that use home heating oil in Quebec, and the price of that has increased 2 to 4 times faster than other types of heating.
Why
So
would that
we are going
bother
to
you?
work
You
with
want to turn the
Atlantic
lights
Canada
off.
to bring
You
down
want
those
to turn the heat
prices
off.
over the next few years.
You want people to starve. You want people to freeze.
Speaker, as
And
we
you want
continue
people
on
to
the path
die
of
for climate change.
reconciliation, there is
You
more
are
and more
such a
evidence
halfway.
showing that Indigenous-led solutions lead to better, more sustainable outcomes and stronger, healthier communities. It's easy to see when it comes to mental wellness. For generations, Indigenous peoples have known that wellness and health depended on holistic connections and relationships with each other and with culture.
See, this guy's got,
By contrast,
he's
our
got
narrow
his
one-size-fits-all
question in his
Western approach has
little
left far too
green
many Indigenous people
book
by
here.
the wayside. What is the government doing to make sure Indigenous-led models of wellness
They gave
are
him his
reaching
little
the
green
people who
book
need them?
before he went downstairs and said, "Hey, read this, please."
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank the member for Cloverdale Langley for this question. And I'm so
Patty
grateful to Indigenous leaders who are working so hard on blending traditional and Western ways of
breach of
healing.
incompetence.
At the second annual National Summit on Mental Health, people gathered to share successful stories about programs that are designed by Indigenous people for Indigenous people. From a Hausa keynote speech to the Pimishka Project in Northern Quebec, healing is happening.
Really
and we can all learn from the wisdom of Indigenous partners. So I thank every participant for sharing their knowledge.
The Honourable Member from Churchill, Kiwatinokaski.
Mr. Speaker, a new study found that big Canadian companies stashed away $120 billion in Luxembourg to avoid paying their taxes. This while working class Canadians and those on fixed incomes play by the rules and are falling further and further behind. This is the result of Liberal and Conservative governments creating a tax code that supports the wealthy not paying their taxes.
You're the one supporting the Liberal government.
It's costing Canadians
Have you ever
billions of dollars,
processed
that could go to healthcare,
Has it
housing,
ever
or
entered your
Indigenous
little head?
communities.
No.
So when will this government finally crack down on wealthy tax cheats and make sure they pay their fair share?
How many MPs do you think are wealthy?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Everyone must contribute their fair share to financing public services. Contrarily to the Conservative leader who demonizes the income tax and wants the rich to pay less, we are trying to redouble our efforts so that they pay and that they do not use loopholes to avoid this responsibility. The CRA has
made this woman a
experts
parliamentary
and continues
secretary.
to use sophisticated tools to
God.
better detect and deal with the most serious cases of non-compliance. And this government really does care, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Yeah. They care.
The honourable member
They care to
from
put people
Saanich
like you
Gulf
in
Islands.
positions like that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we've gathered here for the last
Oh,
hour
no,
or so,
not Elizabeth
question period,
May.
I keep wanting to engage in the debate.
She
and
can't
talk
bother
about
to
the
show
climate
up for
crisis,
work.
But all I can think about is that while we're sitting here in such safety and security, the children of Gaza are terrorized and terrified. Children in Israel remain terrorized and terrified. We need a ceasefire, and we need it now. And I want my government, I want the government of Canada that has always stood for peace, for solutions to conflicts that don't involve the bombing of civilians, which is a war crime in itself. Please, to my government, to any minister, stand up and say right now that Canada will call for a ceasefire on both sides now.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the honourable member for her compassion and her question. We've seen the horrific scenes of unspeakable violence, of Hamas abhorrent terrorism, and we unequivocally condemn the attack. The price of justice cannot be the continued suffering of Palestinian civilians. What is unfolding in Gaza is a human tragedy.
I know.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs continues to engage in efforts to help Canadians. Mr. Speaker, we need humanitarian pauses. Canadians must be allowed to leave Gaza. More humanitarian aid needs to get in, and
That's the word of the week, by the way. Pause.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That's the word of the week. We're having a carbon tax pause.
And that brings in to the end of question period.
Oh, no.
Before I
Here we go. Anyway. Oh, just a second here.
November 1st, 2023, Madam Speaker, I have the honour to inform you that the Right Honourable Mary May Simon, Governor-General of Canada, signified royal assent by written declaration to the bill listed in the schedule to this letter on the first day of November 2023 at 4:12 p.m.
Oh, how nice.
Maya Welburn, Acting General Secretary to the Government.
Oh, thank you very much. Anyway, thanks for watching today. I think we've had a good week with question period. It's a bad week for Canada, but thanks for watching because we need to be informed and we need to resolve to resist. We have to keep fighting this Liberal government. This is one of the biggest fights in history. We got to fight this Liberal government like you've never fought anything in the past. This is like a war because this government is catastrophic. They stand up there and they lie and they grandstand and they tell you complete crap every day. And they expect you to just ingest it and thank them very much for this. But this is a government, it's a criminal government, it's an authoritarian government. This is a government that acts more fascist than it does liberal, and it's just a charade. The whole thing is a charade, and we need a change as quickly as possible before Trudeau does more damage to the country than he's already done. So thanks for your concern. Thanks for caring about Canada. And we'll be back again. And I've got another episode of Stand on Guard coming out this afternoon about immigration. Please watch it and please like it as soon as you can, because we've got to beat the YouTube algorithm and we've got to beat Trudeau's censorship. So thanks for watching.